thanks for tuning in today. I'm Gunnar Qualset. I'm the compliance officer here at Premier Marketing. With all the buzz out there on the new CMS Final Rule and the new definition of marketing, we just wanted to take this opportunity to relay the information we do have at this point. Please know we've been working diligently over the last weeks and months with our carrier partners just to get some clarity on some of the regulations that were a little gray. We've gotten some feedback from them. We're still waiting on some others, so just keep in mind we may not have all of the information at this point, but we wanted to get in front of you and relay the information that we have so you can start planning for AEP. So here at Premier, we truly value our partnership with our agents, and helping you sell compliantly is something we take pride in. So please stay tuned for this short presentation on CMS's final rule.
All right, so let's get started. As many of you know, CMS issued their final rule for plan year 2024 back in April. And since then, we've been trying to get clarification on a few of the new rules because, like always, there was some gray area that needed clarification. And we were hoping to have some solid answers before we got out in front of you guys and presented to you the new final rule. Just keep in mind, we've received some clarification on certain rules. Others we're still waiting for carriers to either hear back from CMS or to provide their own interpretations of the CMS rules. So what I'm saying is we may not have all the answers right now. We'll inform you of what we know at this point. Try to lay out the final rules for you so you understand how they affect you in your day-to-day business. And then as we get more clarification, more guidance from carriers, we'll be sure to pass that on to you guys when we get that. All right, so let's take a look at the agenda here. So first, we'll take a look at CMS's new definition of marketing that was passed out on May 10th in a memo. Then we will dive into the actual final rule from April and how that affects you guys. All right, so first here, the definition of marketing as defined by CMS. So first of all, just a little background. Hopefully everyone is aware of this, but just for those maybe who aren't, I just want to give a little background on marketing as it pertains to CMS. So CMS basically defines marketing as a subset of communications that must meet both intent and content standards. That means basically, in the eyes of CMS, anything agents create for advertising, their websites, social media, mailers, flyers, billboards, signs, whatever it is, anything that agents create to advertise themselves or to disseminate to consumers is considered a communication. Communications, while one must be compliant, it does encompass everything, but there is a subset of those communications that meet marketing standards. To do that, again, there must be intent, which for agents is typically always there, meaning you're either trying to generate a lead, get in contact with consumers, and then ultimately, obviously, make a sale. So generally, intent is always there, so it usually boils down to content, the content side of it. So basically, if any of your materials have content regarding plan benefits, benefit structure, premiums, cost sharing, co-pays, anything to do with costs in the plan, measuring ranking standards, star ratings, rewards, incentives, anything like that, then it meets that content standard and is considered marketing. And obviously, as we know, since last year, anything deemed marketing then must be submitted to CMS for approval. So on May 10th, CMS actually expanded their definition of marketing, because prior to May 10th, CMS allowed any mention of widely available benefits such as dental, vision, hearing, prescription drugs to be mentioned in communication materials and not meet the content standard. But as of May 10th and effective July 10th, CMS has expanded that definition to include any content that mentions any type of benefit covered by the plan. So for example, if your website is just explaining what a Medicare Advantage plan is and simply states Medicare Advantage plans may have additional benefits such as dental, vision, hearing, that is now going to be marketing, and thus you would need to submit that to CMS for approval. And that goes for any type of your materials. Again, websites, social media, mailers, flyers, ads, anything like that. So hopefully that is clear. If it is not, we're always here to help. Reach out, starting with your marketing team. They're very knowledgeable. We've trained them on this, so they should be able to help out. If they can't, they can come to us in the compliance department. All right, so let's dive into the actual final rule. We'll start here with the scope of appointment. CMS issued new guidance regarding scope of appointment, and they're basically kind of backtracking and going back to the way things were a few years back. So for plan year 2024, scope of appointments must be obtained at least 48 hours prior to a personal marketing appointment. CMS initially gave 2 exceptions to that new rule. Scope of appointments that were completed during the last 4 days of a valid election period was 1, and unscheduled in-person meetings or walk-ins were also an exclusion to the 48-hour rule. Since then, there were questions in regards to inbound calls, and if that would be an exception as well. And we have just recently gotten clarification on that inbound calls initiated by the beneficiary would be an exception and considered a walk-in. Okay. Moving on here, this has been a pretty hot topic, topic of a lot of confusion, one that we still need probably more clarity from the carriers on, and we will pass that on as we get it. But one of the new rules is that MA organizations and TPMOs, which encompass agents, agencies, FMOs, NMOs, whatever, any downline of MA organizations, may not use the Medicare name, CMS logo, products, including the Medicare card, basically anything that looks governmental in a misleading way. So I've highlighted in a misleading way because initially in the proposed rules, CMS did not include that language. But when they finalized the rules, they did add that. So while it seems to soften up the language a little bit, it does leave it up for interpretation. So we anticipate each carrier interpreting that in a different way and having different guidance because of it, which makes it a little harder for us as agents. If we have multiple carriers, we have to appease them all. And if they have different interpretations, it makes it difficult. But we'll do our best to try to help you along the way with that. So reach out to us as needed there. One item of note in there is that use of the Medicare card is now only permitted with prior authorization from CMS. They issued that guidance, but nobody seems to know at this point yet how you go about getting that authorization. Our carriers have questions in with CMS, and they're just awaiting a response back from CMS. So once we understand how you go about doing that, we will relay that information on to you. So back to the verbiage of in a misleading way, right? until precedent is set, until carriers inform us on how they're going to interpret that, we won't really know. So we're kind of waiting for that precedent to really be set as we move forward closer to AEP, and as materials are starting to be submitted for the upcoming plan year, we should get more clarity on that. But at minimum, everyone will need to take a more conservative approach when dealing with materials that can appear governmental or make it appear that you're affiliated with the government or Medicare in any way. Examples of that, you know, if you have Medicare in the title of a web page or in the URL or prominently displayed on the top of a mailer, things like that, you'll need to take extra steps to ensure that it's clear that one, you are an insurance agent, and two, that you're not affiliated with the government or Medicare in any way. So there's multiple ways to do that, and CMS and carriers are probably going to expect the use of multiple ways to do that, not just simply a disclaimer at the bottom saying you're not affiliated with the government. With these new regulations, that's probably not going to be sufficient. They're going to want to see other things used in conjunction with that disclaimer. For instance, qualifying language. They're kind of big on that lately. And I'll show you here on the next page what is meant by qualifying language. So here are some examples of what carriers over the last year have liked to see on materials, web pages, things like that, that can appear governmental or have Medicare in the name. So if you use this qualifying language in conjunction with your disclaimers and some other items that might help make it clear that you're an insurance agent, we're thinking that this is going to be enough to provide clarity to consumers that you're not affiliated with the government, so you wouldn't be using Medicare in a misleading way then. So as you can see here, like we have a couple of websites as examples. The top right corner there is a mailer. Most lead companies now are being required to leave a space for the agent name, and the agency logo, so it's clear on the front of those mailers who it's coming from and that it's an insurance agent or insurance agency. Okay. Just a little more on this item here, kind of some examples on what to avoid. So for instance, like a postcard or a mailer with Medicare notice at the top, or personal and confidential, important Medicare information. Any of those things can be considered misleading and could possibly lead consumers to think you are with the government or Medicare. So you must be really careful with like lead vendor pieces. Carriers have told us that lead vendor pieces, basically they deem them to appear governmental. So you have to go above and beyond in those pieces to make it clear that it's from an insurance agent and what it's being used for, essentially. Other items are like a flyer, you know, using the image of the Medicare card without prior approval. You'll need to avoid that now. Advising member to call you for extra benefits without making it clear that those benefits are part of an MA plan. And obviously getting prior approval, because if you're listing benefits, it's marketing and it needs submitted to CMS for approval. Materials, like including websites that use the word Medicare in the naming convention. We talked about that on the previous page, right? Use that qualifying language, make it very clear you're not affiliated with the government or Medicare. Okay. So call recordings. CMS issued a little clarification here. I don't necessarily think it's, you know, positive one way or the other, but it's maybe one that isn't, that they maybe loosened up the restrictions a little bit. So it's kind of positive in a way. Old guidance was to record all calls because from last year's final rule, carriers didn't really know how to interpret what calls needed to be recorded, so they made an overarching declaration that just all calls should be recorded to be safe. So this year, CMS clarified that, and now only marketing, sales, and enrollment calls, including the audio portion of virtual meetings, need to be recorded. Okay, so marketing, sales, and enrollment calls. You know, to be safe, that's kind of anything through the whole process of enrollment, right? The initial contact with the client should be recorded. Any lead generation type activity there, all through the plan presentations, the needs analysis, anything like that, obviously including the enrollment portion, should be recorded. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Obviously, like I'd mentioned earlier, if there's questions, reach out to your marketing team and we'll be sure to help you. And moving along here to educational events. Again, kind of like the scope of appointment, educational events are basically reverting back to the way the restrictions were a few years back. Okay, so now it is prohibited from conducting a sales event within 12 hours of an educational event at the same location. Same location means the same building or any adjacent buildings. Okay, it also prohibits scheduling future marketing appointments while at an educational event. Okay, and it also prohibits the collection of scope of appointment forms at educational events as well. So what does that mean? What can you do now? Well, you can still, as always, give the attendees, you know, your business card or contact information for them to reach out to you with questions. Okay, and you may also distribute and collect BRC or permission to contact forms. Obviously, those need to be optional. You can't require that for their attendance. They need to be optional and basically kind of initiated or at the request of the attendee. You can make it known that you can help them, but they need to sign this form in order for you to contact them at a later date. Okay. Some new guidance. Well, it's not really new guidance, but rather clarification on some old guidance on beneficiary contact. There must have been some confusion that CMS had found in some of their investigations into complaints, but they basically just clarified that permission to contact, for example, a returned BRC form or something, where the consumer is requesting contact, that does not give agents permission to show up unscheduled at the beneficiary's residence. So you can't go door knock, even if the consumer's address is on that BRC form. It doesn't give you permission to go show up at their residence without a pre-scheduled appointment. And also it clarified, which this is actually helpful, they actually clarified that permission to contact and scope of appointments are valid for 12 months. So it kind of put a clear, hard determination on the validity of those. Just do note, though, that carriers may have their own and stricter guidelines for SOA validity. So just be aware of carrier guidelines on that as well. Okay, the TPMO disclaimer. Not a new thing, but they did revise the verbiage within the TPMO disclaimer to add some additional pieces to it. Now, as of plan year 2024, the TPMO disclaimer needs to include state health insurance programs as a means of contact for additional help. So you have to add that information in there. And then they also are going to require that the number of organizations or carriers represented by the TPMO or agent as well as the number of plans available, are listed in that TPMO disclaimer. We're still waiting on clarity on how agents are supposed to accurately do that. So we'll kind of have to wait and see how that goes. But at this point, just use your best effort to be accurate with that number, and we'll go from there. We get a lot of questions, obviously, on, like, for instance, agent websites that are, you know, available to everyone in the world to look at. Agents obviously can be contracted in multiple states, multiple carriers. The plans available in each county can vary. Number of organizations an agent is contracted with can vary state by state or whatever. So there's a lot of ambiguity there that we're trying to get clarity on, and we will be sure to pass guidance on as we get it. Okay, we are nearing the end. Just a few slides left here. But a few other items that may be applicable to agents is that the first one there, okay, TPMOs must receive approval from carriers prior to submitting marketing materials to CMS. So that is new guidance in there, but it's not necessarily going to be completely new process for agents, because over the last year, at least most of the larger carriers have already required that we submit materials to them prior to submission to CMS. So essentially, your process for getting those materials approved is still going to be the same, right? You get the material you want, try to get it as compliant as you can, send it to us, we'll review it, come back to you with any edits or suggestions there. Then we submit it to the carriers for you. Once we get all the carriers' approvals back, then we can submit it to CMS. So that process is the same, but CMS just now requires all carriers to have that process rather than leaving it up to the carrier. The second one there, marketing of benefits in a service area where those benefits are not available is now prohibited unless avoidable because you're using local or regional media. Okay, so again, there's a little gray area there, ambiguity. We're looking for clarification, and really we're going to have to wait until precedent is set to see how this will be monitored. So basically what we feel this is in regards to is we feel it's kind of targeting those national TV commercials that advertise all these different benefits, like, you know, Part B buyback, your utilities and flex cards and all these things, all those benefits that really aren't available to the wide population. They're only available to a select few. But they're using that as a way to generate calls in so they can get that permission to contact and then sell them a plan, essentially. The example we've been given as an exception to this is that, so the local or regional media, for instance, if an agent would be using in a local newspaper, putting an ad that's deemed marketing, right? It has benefits or something in it. They use this newspaper that may cover like a 10 zip code county. Well, the benefits within their ad are only available in 5 of the 10 zip codes. Okay, they deem that as an unavoidable circumstance. So you're okay to run that ad in that local medium, even though those benefits may not be available to each and every service area. So that obviously limits the ability to, you know, advertise nationally, or, you know, like this will probably hinder lead vendors, you know, national lead vendors who are sending out mass mailers to the entire population. It's going to make advertising benefits much more difficult there. The third one may not be very applicable to agents. We're highlighting it because it's in there, but basically marketing materials cannot advertise beneficiary savings based on comparisons to an uninsured individual. So you can't make it look like you're going to save all this money by signing up for this plan when you're making the comparison between an uninsured individual and an insured individual. And lastly there, this is kind of going to be a big change for most, right? This basically states that you cannot market any products, plans, benefits, okay, unless the carrier name of the entity offering those products, plans, benefits is identified on the marketing material. So our best interpretation as of now, it could change as we hear more from carriers, but our best interpretation of that is if you have a marketing material and it lists benefits on it, you need to list on the marketing piece itself the carriers you have that offer plans with those benefits. Okay, that can't be done in a little disclaimer either. It says it has to be, prominently displayed, easily read by the average Medicare beneficiary. So that is going to be a bit of a change. Okay, final slide here. We're about to the end. The first one there is probably more on the carrier side, but we highlight it because it's a change in what you need to highlight within the pre-enrollment checklist. So carriers obviously are responsible for drafting up that pre-enrollment checklist. CMS is now stating that the effect on coverage must now be included in that pre-enrollment checklist. The effect on coverage meaning a statement or something clarifying to the beneficiary that, hey, you're enrolling in a new plan, and enrollment in this new plan will cancel any current coverage you have, right? They've found in their investigations that a lot of times beneficiaries are calling in to complain to CMS because they think they're only signing up for extra benefits and keeping their current plan. They're not really realizing that they're signing up for a new plan and it'll take the place of their old plan. So that's why that item is in there, and that's why it's important for agents to stress that in your presentations, that this is a new plan. We're not just adding benefits, it's a new plan, and it'll cancel your current coverage if you have any. And then lastly there, a more robust oversight plan. Again, this is geared toward the plans or carriers, right? But they must establish and implement an oversight plan that monitors agent and broker activities and that can identify non-compliance. So we haven't really heard from carriers yet what they plan to do in lieu of this new guidance, but we can assume that they will probably have even more oversight over agent activities, right? So that means they're going to pass the responsibility kind of down the line as far as oversight efforts go. So just be aware that obviously we all know over the past years, each year compliance becomes more and more important, oversight becomes more and more important, right? And quite frankly, CMS has that microscope out and it's being magnified each year. So just anticipate there might be some changes in how carriers are going about monitoring agent compliance standards and how agents are selling out there. All right, so that is, to us, the main items of the final rule that are really applicable to agents out there in the field selling. So again, we want to be there for you. We're here for continued support. Whenever you have questions, please ask. Like I mentioned earlier, our marketing teams have been educated on the new final rule and compliance in general. So they're there to help you. Reach out to them. They can always come to us. We do have a compliance email where you can send questions to as well. And we're always glad to help in that way. So with that, I hope everyone found this informative and educational, and it'll help you as you plan your marketing strategies for the upcoming AEP.